What's the most spectacular way you've seen someone fuck up at work? A grad student was invited into a professor's office for a meeting and was left alone for a moment. There was a pile of cumulative exams on the professor's desk that had just been graded. These are subject exams for grad students, wickedly difficult, and you need to pass 4 to continue in the program. This jackass decided he'd take a look at the stack of exams, then upon finding that some of his fellow students did poorly, he took pictures of their grades so he could use them to ridicule them and pass the results around the department. This was a big deal because numerical grades aren't ever given out for these exams, only pass/fail, and also it's a pretty big FERPA violation to distribute others' personal academic information like that. He was found out almost as soon as he sent the pics around and was dismissed and forbidden from campus immediately. Someone else had to pack up his desk because they were that serious about him never setting foot in the building again. I saw a guy carrying greater than $100,000 worth of partially processed semiconductor wafers for a radar system stumble and fall, shattering all of them. He wasn't fired, but definitely didn't have fun explaining why he was hand-carrying them instead of using the less convenient but far safer trolley. People are idiots when they get comfortable around stuff. The brain just shuts down on the safety things when you do something day in/day out. One of my coworkers at a grocery store accidentally locked the only master key set into the security office, then attempted to break the door down with a claw hammer before anyone could find out. 10 minutes of furious attacking only succeeded in attracting the attention of everyone in the store, breaking off the handle and bending the entire lock, making it inoperable by the locksmith brought in later. I used to work in a grocery store and I had an HR person repeatedly lose my doctor's note stating that I have Raynaud's syndrome and couldn't be in the freezer. I got a stack of them from the doc and would have to bring in a new one every few weeks. Finally, I had a department head fax a copy into corporate for me before dropping off yet another copy to HR. The next week the HR called me into her office and told me I was going to have to put the frozen load for bakery away. I told her I couldn't do it and I had a note on file. She told me she didn't have any paperwork on file for me and that she could make me do anything she wanted to. I called my department manager into the office and told him what she had said. He got corporate on the phone and asked if they had received the copy of my doctor's note detailing the fact that I had Raynaud's syndrome and had already previously gotten frostbite at work from being forced to be in the freezer when I wasn't supposed to be. They said they had it, and he then told them what HR had said. He then handed HR the phone. She had to hold the phone about 1.5 feet away from her face because they were yelling at her so loud. It was one of the most satisfying days ever working there. She went on leave shortly after that and never came back, and the official story was that she was having health problems. Worked in a single-story cinder block office with parking spaces out front. There was a big window that overlooked the parking lot. We had an older engineer, early 70s, that worked there. He pulled up one morning in his parking spot and must have gotten the brakes and the gas confused. He drove the car right through the window, taking out some of the wall with it. I can still remember seeing him gripping the steering wheel with this terrified look in his eyes while he kept slamming on the gas. The car must have gotten stuck on something because it would just lurch forward and the engine would rev. Luckily he didn't kill anyone. He retired soon after that. Edit: steering wheel not steering window. Currently work for a large medical practice. Saw surveillance video of a man who randomly pressed the quench button on one of our MRI machines. The button is only supposed to be pressed in emergency situations and can cost upwards of $50,000 to repair the MRI magnet. The man who did it was husband of a custodial worker and he had no clearance to be in one of our offices. The cleaning company's contract was swiftly terminated, and those two were most likely shit-canned as a result. This one time I worked at a company who made shelter cloth. Like for orchards. It was woven from plastic thread. There were these huge banks of needles that just ran and ran making these giant rolls of cloth. The night shift guy was pretty new. And the night shift was just him and the machine. It would take most of the shift to do a full roll with setup and takedown. The lunchroom was baffled because the production floor was pretty noisy. So the night shift guy basically just had to babysit the weaver all night and then change the roll out and set up for day shift. I came in early one morning because I wanted to pick up some gear I'd left in my locker and I walk into the unholiest nightmare you have ever seen. A Gordian knot at least 30 foot high. The dude had sat there until like 2 a.m., the darkest part of the night. Then he decided to smoke a joint in the lunchroom and had fallen asleep. He woke up hours later to the sound of the weaver smashing itself to pieces. One of the needle banks had moved during the night and he hadn't seen the warning indicator. So then it had worked its way loose. Then snapped, then flipped over and snapped the one next to it. Then it had made hundreds and hundreds of meters of f***ed-up Frankenstein cloth with giant kilometer-long thread bunches. I walked into him screaming. He had woken up 15 minutes prior and had not got past freaking out. I could think clearer than him, so I went and got the big forklift and pulled this huge bird's nest off the machine. He took it way out back of the yard and hid it from view. Then we grabbed some spare needle banks and slammed them in and likewise hid the busted up ones in the dumpster. Then we started feeding in a new roll and just got the machine going again when the day shift came in. They were surprised that the night guy had got through the overnight materials so fast, but since it happened sometimes when the machine behaved, they didn't make a big deal. I went back to uni about 2 months later and never found out if the story continued. But the crazed look of the night shift guy screaming and holding his chest has stayed with me for 30 years. Someone was using a scissor lift to paint the inside wall of our warehouse. This warehouse area had in the past contained a small office which according to code required a sprinkler head inside the office. There was a long pipe extending down from the ceiling that now just had a sprinkler head pointed at the ground, considering the office had been removed. The operator of the scissor lift did not realize this pipe was here and ran into it with the scissor lift. The pipe broke off in spectacular fashion, spewing disgusting 30-year-old black water all over the warehouse for an hour before anyone came in to help him, considering it was the weekend. The water had pooled up so much it created a river which flowed directly into the office area. I was watching on the cameras since I was at home far from the warehouse. The look on the guy's face was heartbreaking. I do remember the CEO of the company being there in his weekend attire helping clean up. He walked into the office area where the guy who broke the sprinkler was. I could see the dread on his face. Almost brought a tear to my eye when I saw the CEO give him a pat on the back and a hug. That place was full of wild stories like this. I used to deliver pizzas. Our dumb manager that lived in a hotel and f***ed everything that moved contracted hepatitis A but told no one and still came into work. After a few days he began looking like an overweight banana and was complaining of all the classic symptoms. He was told to go home by corporate while we had to deep clean the store and threw away all the ingredients due to possible contamination. In the middle of us cleaning he decides to waltz in with what we think may be a hooker because he forgot his jacket. I was so dumbfounded that he would do this in front of one of the big wigs that were monitoring us. He was fired on the spot. 2 days after that, our restaurant made the local news when a few people began to claim that they had contracted hepatitis A from our pizza. There was a HEPA outbreak in our community at the time, so whether that was true or not I'll never know. Sales suffered and it took the store almost a year to recover. I'm a cashier in a pharmacy. Anyone that works in the medical field knows that patient privacy is super important. When a patient picks up their prescription, we have to scan the receipt of their medication to the computer. This is unique to each individual prescription, so if it does not match, we accidentally grabbed someone else's medication. It catches mistakes before we make them. The alternative to scanning is typing the RX number into the computer. This doesn't guarantee a match. Only comparing the number on the receipt with the number on the computer will work if the barcode won't work. One day, while I was on break, someone came in looking for a prescription. The girl covering my post clearly confirmed the date of birth, but grabbed someone else's prescription by mistake. 2 people with the same last name were next to each other in the fridge. But, she didn't scan the receipt, so her mistake was not caught. She typed the number she saw on the computer, had the person sign for their medication, and gave them someone else's medication. Not 20 minutes later, the patient calls and tells us that what he received was not intended for him. We of course, apologized, and he came back to get his medication. The sad thing is, once something leaves the store, it cannot be returned. We can dispose it, but we cannot use it for someone else, even if it is sealed. This particular medication cost $4,000, and we had to throw it out. This plus the breach of privacy did not stand well, and she was written up for her mistake. She doesn't use cash much anymore and is confined to packaging. Edit. We had another incident recently that didn't get off the ground as far as I know. All I know is that both parties were called and that was that. For those who don't know, all prescriptions have to go through the pharmacist or a registered technician before they can be released. This is to ensure it's going to the right person, and that it was filled according to the doctor's requests. It also allows the pharmacist to check for any odd doses, dose changes, potential interactions, or allergies. This pharmacist filled 2 prescriptions for 2 different people, but they were both getting the same brand of birth control. She mixed up the bags, putting patient A's receipt with patient B's pills and vice versa. I served the girl, and since the receipts matched, had no issues. She went on and caught the mistake the next day. Nothing was traced back to me since it was a pharmacist error. Cashiers aren't really supposed to be digging through bags unless requested by a patient, so I wouldn't have caught it. This literally happened last Thursday. New teacher at the daycare, working in the baby room. Here's her list of what made everyone dislike her. She told many aides she didn't like babies. While working in the baby room. 2. She refused to change diapers, burp the babies, or even feed them in high chairs. She just sat in the same chair and refused to do anything. She wouldn't train new aides or help them in the room. She did not care about bonding with the children or even her co-workers. But her biggest fuck-up was that she let a baby roll off the changing table. According to my co-workers, she simply walked away from this child and left him there, and he rolled off and hit the floor. Double apparently is that she has a history of this where other teachers and aides had to be like WTF, watch the baby and keep a hand on them at all times, the changing table. The only reason she took the job was because, and I quote, "Daddy won't give me spending money with my graduation present, so I'm just gonna do this until July and then quit." Her grad present was a 2-week trip to Hawaii. She got fired for negligence, so good riddance. The baby is fine and the parents aren't suing or anything, and I only think this is because the other teacher who was feeding the new infant, was there and they trust her heavily, and now she'd never or their son directly in harm's way. Good riddance. Was in the Navy, a first-class CD car was heading up Jack job on our jet, was basically a Boeing 707 with the passenger seats gutted. I was in my shop getting ready for a work order on another jet with the rest of my shift and we hear this terrible loud noise. We all head out to see what's up. He rushed through the motions and dropped the jet onto the hangar bay floor. He fucking dropped a $140 million aircraft while they were changing a tire. We had a guy who wasn't trained in the use of the forklifts decide to get on one without a spotter and move a pallet of multiple 5-gallon paint buckets to do something. I'm not sure what he was thinking. Instead of moving them properly, he rammed the tines of the forklift into the containers on the pallet, meaning several 5-gallon buckets of paint ruptured all over the forklift and the floor. He freaked out and turned it, smacking into a shelf rack frame, bending that, which ended up needing to be replaced, and the paint fouled up the forklift mechanisms. Natch, he was fired. Pretty much on the spot. Watched a tech troubleshooting a cutting laser. Apparently the safety stop was locked up and he finally got the laser running, but tested it by waving his hand in front of the aperture. Instant third-degree burns almost all the way through the palm of his left hand. Smelled like a charbroiler. I never saw him again. I hope he didn't lose all his fingers, but I wouldn't be surprised. Went through phone screening for life insurance with a company contracted through my carrier. The woman interviewing me was new and didn't seem to be getting her job. I'll have worked as a trainer myself, so I tried to make her at ease and lighten the mood. I have Ehlers-Danlos type 3, so when answering the screening questions I answered yes to lots of questions. I have lots of minor medical issues, but they are all weird things, and with EDS things like chest pain and palpitations are really common. I've had everything checked out and they aren't life-threatening issues, just minor things you deal with, but they look scary on paper and there are a lot of them. Everyone in my family lives well into their 90s regardless of this and the smoking and drinking they do. Anyway, all of this was really throwing the trainee off. She kept putting me on hold, asking her trainer questions and coming back on the line. It was clear that she needed to ask questions based upon an underwriting program and fill in the required computerized forms so they could be sent for medical review by someone qualified. She did not need to make any decisions, just fill out the forms. After 30 minutes of this, she put me on hold and consulted her trainer again. Except I wasn't on hold. I don't know what was said before to her trainer, but this time she chose to complain about the number of things that I said yes to, the massive problem list I have, and said that I'm probably going to die soon anyway. TS happened pretty fast given the situation and the fact that I'd been trying to help her. I was pretty shocked at what I was hearing. After hearing her proclaim I was on the verge of death, I piped up and said, "I can hear you." So she hung up on me. I ended up calling my insurance company back to decline a quote, as I'd had enough for now. My carrier contacted the screening company and pulled the recordings and requested information about the incident. The trainee was fired before I had even called back. Unfortunately, the phone call is now being used for training purposes, with my information removed. Yay!